Printer can print up to 10 lines per second.
Welcome home, Columbia. Beautiful, beautiful.
This printer can print up to 10 lines per second. This printer can print up to 10 lines per second.
This is lesson 26. I'm calling it mover. And I guess you could call it mover div because we're moving a little HTML object. And this is what it's going to look like. I mean, the title here is Mover 1 version 2 because I've been playing around with different versions. So there it goes. It's kind of like a little truck or something. I don't know. And you can see as it gets to the end, it starts all over. Okay, and then we can stop it and start it again. Okay, so the code is, there's quite a bit to it. Here's the CSS up here. And here's some HTML here, and actually I'm going to have you write a little bit of JavaScript before I get started. So copy this CSS inside the style, and copy this HTML, and then so pause this and copy that, and be careful, just take your time. There's a lot of stuff here. Take your time, get the spelling right. And don't rush it. And then I'm going to show you what script I want you to copy down. Okay, so you've copied the CSS and the HTML. And now I want you to copy a little bit of JavaScript here. We have some variables. Variable here with a couple get elements. And get element with some add event listeners where we're not using a variable because we don't need to. Remember this dot add event listener. Okay, so go ahead and pause that and copy that, and we will start writing some functions. Okay, so you probably noticed that we have a couple add event listeners here, and we're listening for a click event, and we're going to go to a go function here or a stop function here, depending on which button we press. So we need to write those functions. So let's write the first one, the go function. So function go. If that button is pressed, then we are going to say got speed equals true. I will explain that in 1 second. Now function stop is, I guess you could say, the opposite. Got speed equals false. Okay, so what are we saying there? We have this variable called got speed, and we initialize it as false, meaning its original setting is false. Its original value is false. And then we've got two buttons we're going to create. And if we click the go button, we're going to set got speed to true. If we click the stop button, we're going to set the got speed to false. And now as I write this next function, you will understand what that is about. And this function is going to be called update display. So now we have a new function, update display. We need to test got speed. If got speed equals true, and I want to point something out before I go further here. This says we're testing. Is got speed true? That's what this is testing. But we can also do this, and you see it all the time, and this is why I'm introducing it to you now, so that you don't get confused if you see it in other code. I don't actually have to say equals true. I can just say if got speed. Because what that's testing is got speed true or not? This, without even saying, does it equal true, this little if statement is testing if got speed is true or not. So it's testing if true, if false. Okay? May sound confusing, but get used to it. So if got speed is true, I want to take this x up here, that's a position, the x position. So if got speed is true, meaning we have speed, then I want to take x and set it equal to x plus speed. And you can see, remember, we declared speed up here as 3. So that means I'm changing the value of x. Now I want to introduce one other thing here. There's a shortcut. I may have introduced this in previous tutorials. I don't remember, but I probably did. But it's okay to go over it more than once. The equivalent of x equals x plus speed is x plus equals speed. Okay? So that, let me write it down again. So that is the equivalent of this. I'm going to write a comment here so that JavaScript will ignore it. That is the equivalent of this. X equals x plus speed. So this is just a shortcut for this. That's all that is. Okay, so now else. Else x plus equals 0. So we're saying here, up here, if got speed is true, if it has speed, then increment the speed, change the speed. And if not, then just don't change it. Add 0 to it, which doesn't change it. Okay? Okay, now there's another thing we have to test. And that is, remember when our little mover went past the edge? We have to test that. Because if it does go past the edge, we have to set x to 0. We have to set it back to 0. And the way we do that is we say if x exceeds window inner width, then x equals 0. Okay. So now we're basically testing speed, got speed rather, and then we are changing x based on if it's true, if got speed is true or false. And down here we're testing, did the mover move past the edge of the window? If it did, we need to reset it to 0. We need to restart it back. Now we actually have to, with the CSS, we have to change the x position of the mover. And the way we do that is we say mover style left. That is the x position of the mover equals x plus, in quotes, px, which stands for pixels. So this x is a variable, but the px is not a variable. And the px stands for pixels. So this actually moves that little div, is that what it is? Is it div? Yeah. To this location based on the value of x. And then down here, since we're animating, we need to call update display again. So we'll use set timeout, and update display. Let's call it every 50 milliseconds. Get rid of this extra space. Okay, so one other thing I need to do is, okay, so let's go ahead and save that and run our new file here. This is the old file here. Let's run our new file. Okay, so one other thing we need to do is we need to call update display to kind of get things started. Because nowhere is update display being called except for down here in timeout, but you have to call update display before you can get down here to call it again. Okay, so we need to kind of initialize it, and so we just need to call it. So this is the new code we wrote, even though it has the same title here. Let's change the title. The H1. The title actually was changed, but the H1 wasn't. Save. Okay, so we're moving, we're stopping, we're moving. And it returns. Okay. So that's fun. What can we play with here? Well, a lot of stuff. We've got a lot of code here. So I would start by playing with the speed up in the code. Play around with, find a speed you like. Not much else here you want to play with. So play with the speed. And then when you're done with that, I would come up here and play with the style, the CSS. So maybe change the font. Maybe change the size of the road here. Maybe change the height, location if you want. Keep in mind if you change top, which is the location, that will, if you change the location of the road, you have to change the location of the mover because the mover sits on top of the road. Okay, so play around with that. Play around with your H1 just to kind of give it different looks. And what else? Play with that. Play around with the background color of the mover and the width and the height. And these are, I don't know if you notice this, but inside the div, well, of course you notice it because you wrote it down. This is kind of simulating wheels here. This O dash dash O. Okay, so you could play around with that too. Maybe you can come up with a better look. Okay, so that's a fun little project. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.